This video was made possible with support from viewers like you. If you find this video useful, consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/FastGadgets. Welcome back, Gadgeteers. Behind me I have a Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro. We're going to have a look at this system and do a comparison to the newer Lenovo Yoga 910. Both systems are really nice. The Yoga 2 Pro sports a 4510U i7 dual-core processor, 8 GB of RAM, and a 1 TB SSD that was upgraded when I had the system. We're going to compare it to the Yoga 910, which also has an i7. It's a 7500U dual core, and it has 16 GB of memory and a 512 GB SSD. So let's see what these two can do and how well the Yoga 2 stands up the test of time. One of the things that came to my mind, and I still have to get around to doing a video, is the iMac Pro, and that computer entry level is $5,000. Now, of course, we're looking at mobile hardware, so there's really no comparison to something that's workstation caliber. But I think what I'm trying to bring home here is that you don't have to have the latest and greatest and the newest to do what you want. So let's have a look at the specs here on Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro. What we have here is an Intel Core i7 4510U processor running at 2 GHz base speed. It has 8 GB of RAM, and I believe it is DDR3. It's running Windows 10 version 1703. And it has built-in Intel graphics. I don't remember which ones right now, but I'll put it down at the bottom of the screen here so you can have a look. However, this system actually is really nice. I did upgrade it to a 1 TB mSATA drive, so it's got plenty of storage, plenty of speed. We're going to benchmark this sucker, find out how fast is the subsystem, like using Geekbench 4 with processing and memory. And all around, just find out how good of a system it is. Now, one of the things that amazes me about this system, it's actually the same weight as the Yoga 910 and almost identical in design, with the exception that it has a proprietary port that's used for the power supply, and it has a USB-A type port, which is 2.0 on the left side. On the right side, you have one USB 3.0 port. But the cool thing you do get, of course, is a headphone jack, which everybody loves. But also, you get an SD card reader. Now, to me, this is pro. So whenever I think of something as professional, although I don't use them all that much, it's nice to have the card reader in there because you can pull out your memory card out of your camera and you can get a much faster read speed on that direct drive as opposed to going through a cable from your camera. So we're going to go ahead and do some benchmark scores. Whatever I do on the Yoga 2 Pro, I am going to do on the Yoga 910, and we'll do a comparison and see what we get. All right, we're going to start these at the same time. 3, 2, 1, go. Well, after several attempts, I couldn't get the Yoga 910 to actually show the results on the browser, so the browser would not come up. I did take the Geekbench score and record it from a previous time, and I did get 4,373 on the single core and 8,642 on the multi-core, whereas with the Lenovo Yoga 2, it gets a 3,688 on the single core and a 6,493 on the multi-core. Considering that the Yoga 2 Pro is an i7 processor that's several generations older, it is the 4510U processor, compared to the Yoga 910, which has the 7500U i7 processor, I think 3688 for single core and 6493 for multi-core is respectable compared to the Lenovo Yoga 910 scores. The Geekbench 4 Compute score basically tests out the graphics subsystem. In the case of the Lenovo Yoga 2, we got a score of 15,445. and the Yoga 910 19,270. Really not that much of an improvement over 3 generations, so the built-in integrated graphics aren't going to be stellar, although they can do basic gameplay, but nothing too extravagant. Alright, next we're going to have a look at the disk speed on both of the systems. Both have an SSD. The Lenovo Yoga 2, of course, has an upgraded 1 terabyte SSD, and the 910 has a 512 gigabyte SSD that came with the system. Alright, the crystal disk tests really are amazing to look at. The Yoga 910, basically on the sequential reads and writes, did about 6 times greater than the sequential read on the Yoga 2. So the SSD is definitely much faster than it is in the Yoga 2. However, in normal use you probably would not notice as much. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and do a handbrake test on a 2-minute 30-second 4K file, and we'll render it on both systems and see how they do. Alright, scores are in. We rendered with Handbrake version 1.03. Now both systems were set with a power consumption of balanced. I should say a power setting of balanced, and surprise of surprises, the Lenovo Yoga 2 came in at 11 minutes 23 seconds for this 4K to 1080p render of a 2-minute 35-second file, while the Lenovo Yoga 910 came in at 12 minutes 9 seconds. Now, while the rendering was going on, we could hear the fan a lot on the Lenovo Yoga 910. It would ramp up really high and then slow down, and then ramp up really high and slow down. So it's hard to say exactly what's going on, but it looks like the Yoga 2 was definitely much more consistent in power consumption and the turbo mode that it was set for. So it actually did a better job, despite the fact that it's 3 generations older i7 processor than the Yoga 910. Alright, the final Cinebench scores. The Lenovo Yoga 2 scored 27.35 frames per second in the OpenGL Cinebench R15 scores, and the CPU scored 276 RB. Compare that to the Yoga 910, which scored 42.72 FPS and 283 CB for CPU. Alright, well, how did the Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro fare? Not bad, surprisingly, considering that I bought the computer back in 2014, so it's 4 years old now. Cinebench R15, the Lenovo Yoga 910 did get an OpenGL score of 56.2% higher than the Yoga 2 Pro, so quite a bit of difference there. Now, surprisingly, CPU scores, on the other hand, not that big of a difference. Hard to say why, but it is very surprising that the Yoga 2 Pro came in at 276 and the Yoga 910 at 283, so just 2.5% variance there. Geekbench 4 was a little bit more revealing. Again, we ran the benchmark against the graphics processor that's on board. The OpenCL score for the Yoga 2 Pro, 15,445. The Yoga 910, 19,270. A difference of 24.8%, almost 25%. That's a considerable difference. Single core differences, 18.6% on the Lenovo and 33.1% on multi-core. So multi-core makes quite a difference, and it really doesn't surprise me. We're talking about 7th generation versus 4th generation i7, so there's been quite a bit of change. Looking at the SSD scores, Crystal Disk shows us that the Lenovo Yoga 910, of course, as we expected, is extremely fast, but the fact is you're not really going to notice the difference that much in day-to-day tasks, and even if you're rendering, because rendering really is a processor-intensive task. So the Yoga 2 Pro's sequential read was 544.6 megabytes a second versus the 2,937.4 megabytes per second on the Yoga 910. So we can see that SSDs in the subsystem have increased exponentially as far as speed goes and gotten better and better and better. Looking at a more real-world score, we can see that the Handbrake 4K render, Very interesting. The Yoga 2 Pro finished in 11 minutes 23 seconds, where the Yoga 910 took 12 minutes 9 seconds. Very interesting. So the Yoga 2 Pro actually beat the Yoga 910 by 6.7%. There's a lot of reasons why that could be. I did hear the fan ramping up and then slowing down repeatedly over and over and over, so it might have been doing some throttling there. In the power settings, both systems were set to balanced mode, so I did attempt to make sure that both systems were set equally. One was running the older version of Windows 10, which is the Yoga 2 Pro, while the Yoga 910 was running a newer version. I don't know that that would make much of a difference, but it's really hard to say. So you really can't just look at these synthetic scores. You have to look at actual real-world use of both of the systems and decide really if something like that would work for you. But the bottom line, you don't really need to get a brand new system. You can get something like the Yoga 2 Pro, which has the same weight, it's got the same form factor, the same abilities that the Yoga 910 does, albeit a much larger bezel. But honestly, what's so important about the bezel? One cool thing about the Yoga 2 Pro is the cam is at the top, so when you use your webcam, you're not going to be showing a chin or belly cam like it does for me. And I kind of like that. So the bezels aren't all that. What I really like with the Yoga 910 is I get a 14-inch screen diagonally edge to edge, which is a very nice screen. The bezel's very tiny, so you get a lot of screen real estate, and it actually is in 4K, where the Yoga 2 Pro is an odd 3200 by 1800, so it's actually under 4K. Not sure what you call that particular resolution. It looks beautiful, however, but the bezels are enormous. Even though I would still use the Yoga 2 Pro today if that's what I had. It definitely is serviceable, can do many of the things that the Yoga 910 can do, pretty much all of them, and it's a great system if you're looking for something that's relatively inexpensive, won't kill your pocketbook, and is light and portable, and it definitely is that. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. Like and subscribe. Consider also sharing. I always appreciate that. Hope to see you on the next video. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.